Hello, welcome to Disrupt TV. This is episode number 77, and we're excited here today. I'm Ray Wong, the Constellation Research founder and principal analyst, and I'm joined here with my awesome co-host, Dion Hinchcliffe, one of the top CIO influencers in the world. You've seen him with his awesome presentations and PowerPoints on ZDNet, and more importantly, my guest co-host for Disrupt TV show today. So welcome, Dion. Oh, I think we lost Dion there. So we've got Dion here. He's on the show. He'll join us and when he comes back in. But more importantly, today we've got our special guest, Kim Stevenson, the Senior Vice President and General Manager of Data Center Infrastructure at Lenovo. And if you remember Kim, she was one of our early Disrupt TV show guests, and she is basically in charge of product management, business product marketing, building end-to-end teams, aligning product development, quality, supply chain services, and customer experience all into one. She is one of the top CIOs, top IT leaders in the world, and more importantly, she spent time at Intel, she spent time at IBM, and she spent time in a whole bunch of other places, including EDS, and she's won a lot of awards, including Silicon Valley Business Journal's Best CIO, Avanta's Top 10 Breakaway Leader, and Huffington Post's Most Social CIO, as well as the CIO 100 Award by CIO.com for 4 years in a row. And so we're really excited to have Kim on the show. Welcome to Disrupt TV, Kim.
Hey, Ray. I'm going to have to shorten that intro bio.
No problem. No problem. In a row. So we're really excited. So, yeah. So let's start with the first question. So why is this data center space so interesting to you? And is there a massive change? What's going on? Because when I think of data centers like, oh, it's a data center, like I'm not thinking about a lot of innovation, but you obviously must have saw something interesting for you to make the leap to Lenovo.
Yeah. So, Ray, I'll say, when I first started in data centers, we were kind of like the plumbers of IT. And it's since the advent of cloud, data centers have become the sexy part of IT. And really, what interests me most is we're sort of at this point where it's very clear how companies should be using the cloud. We have new workloads emerging, whether they're AI-based or IoT-based, and you see the intersection between what will need to be performed in a customer's, their own data center and work very well with what they send to the cloud. And those are hard problems in today's environment, and that's the exciting part. I mean, I always want to solve hard problems, but it's at the very beginning of this next era of what the future-defined data center will be, and I wanted to be a part of that. And I think actually that the incumbents in today's space don't actually have a right to that business going forward because it's so dynamic and the changes are so rapid. That makes Lenovo an exciting place because we really don't have as much of an entrenched legacy, and therefore we are free to innovate and disrupt going forward. And that to me makes an exciting value proposition, both from a career point of view, but also from a, what we can offer to customers.
Hi, Kim. This is Dion Hinchcliffe with Constellation, a long time no see. As you were just mentioning, Lenovo is sometimes seen as an underdog in the space. So what initiatives are you driving in your new role as the head of the data center infrastructure group to drive transformation in the space?
Yeah, so I'll just give a shout out to the broader Lenovo team because we just came back from VMworld where our VX series was named one of the hot products out of VMworld. And I give that as an example only because it is the example of how we drive innovation at Lenovo. So we're really focused on this tight integration of hardware and software, wrapping that with services to make the customer experience and the customer journey effortless. And that's ultimately, when you look at IT organizations, the shortage of skills, the amount of automation and integration work that can be done to improve overall operational performance, we think we're the best at that. 4 years in a row, we've been the most reliable x86 server platform. And we just want to extend that up through the middleware and software layer and wrap it with services. We just want to be the overall most reliable and trusted partner.
I'm so bummed. I missed you. I was actually in Vegas last week. I just came home today.
I know. I tried. It was crazy. It was so well run, the event, but it was just nonstop the whole time. So
yeah, no, it was like pre-configured, pre-integrated, hyper-converged VX. That was a mouthful, I remember. So I saw that. I saw the announcement. So while this data center transformation is moving forward, towards a focus on software, right? Getting the software right in place. Who cares about hardware, right? I'm a software guy. Who cares about hardware? What's going on with hardware? I know.
So it's. I love people that say, that hardware doesn't matter. And I'm like, exactly what would you run that software on?
Exactly.
And, really software provides the flexibility and allows you to, automate and make things dynamic. But the robust hardware is what keeps the business running. And more and more of the differentiation that's coming in hardware is specialized to the workload. So that's why you've seen the growth in GPUs, right? That It's a specialized workload, and you can't run those algorithms without that kind of a GPU chip. And so there's a lot of important pieces that the hardware plays, but hardware alone doesn't do anything either, right? Which is why we're so focused on this tight integration between the hardware and the software, and then wrapping that with services to make it easy.
Yep, that totally makes sense. So Kim, you were one of the most well-known CIOs in the industry. You were a CIO at Intel, and you did a lot of great things there. As the CIO role is changing, and we see that more and more IT is moving out to the cloud, and now you have this interesting new role at Lenovo, where arguably you could say, this is where the CIOs are going. They're moving out to the cloud. What advice would you have to other IT leaders kind of on that fork in the road saying, IT is rapidly shifting. I have to make decisions. If I want to be where the most exciting part of the game is that on the vendor side? Is that on the the customer side? What advice would you have?
Well, or is it in the boardroom? Because you see a lot of companies adding CIOs to their board. So one, you have to stand back and say, what's going on, right? And basically every business is a tech business. So the skills that we gather as IT professionals are more valuable than I think individuals realize. We possess unique knowledge about how companies operate because we look at the business from a horizontal, from order to cash, right? Not from the sales execution part. And that is so valuable. And what I try to encourage other IT professionals is make sure you are not undervaluing the knowledge you have about how the company operates, because really you're the only one in the company that looks at it across the process. And so you can, it depends on the agenda, the strategic agenda for the company, but you can either, find ways to improve the overall operational performance of the company, driving improvements to the bottom line, or you can find new growth areas. Where should we be wrapping our traditional products and services with additional IT services? And so I give examples like, payments. So payments are an IT service nowadays. Yes. And so, right, how does your company get paid? How do you want to get paid, right? How do you can change the strategic agenda. And for things that are, as an IT professional, really aren't hard for us to conceptualize, but they are hard for non-IT people. So the farther you get away from the tech industry, the harder it is to conceptualize how important some of these things can transform your company. And so, I could say payments, I could say customer acquisition, I could say a lot of things. And it's true across the board, which is why I think those companies who don't exploit technology are going to get pummeled by it. Actually, and therefore, you need to make sure your company doesn't get pummeled, right?
Actually, I was going to say, I don't want to get pummeled. but hey, you raised a really good point earlier. You're talking about the rise of GPUs, the rise of specialized workloads. We're seeing this, especially with massive computing requirements for AI and blockchain and edge requirements, right, on all the IoT devices on the side. While a lot is moving to the cloud, as in public cloud, there's also a lot of specialized workloads moving to private clouds. And so when you think about massive compute requirements like AI on one end, which public cloud might be more efficient, to very specialized ones on IoT on the edge, like what are you seeing? What's that strategy, and how does that change data centers and business models? Because I don't see people moving data centers away. And Holger Mueller, who just came back from Europe, he was doing a trip talking to CIOs out in Europe, and they're all like, "We're not moving the data center. That's for American operations. We can put them on the cloud. We're keeping our data center." So
well, there is a noticeable shift. 10 years ago is when we started talking about data center consolidation. I remember I had 96 data centers at Intel, and I was going to consolidate them down to 24, and that a lot of that consolidation did happen because what we consolidated was uniform workloads, right? Backup, we didn't need 10 backup sites. We got to, a more rational view of how we would handle backup and recovery. But now you're hitting the next wave, and you're thinking about data centers are purpose-built.
Yep.
So cloud, whether it's public or private, cloud is a delivery model. That's what it is. It improves the delivery of the service, and you should use anything that improves the delivery of your service. So you should be using a cloud. Now you have to say, what am I trying to get done? What's the workload and the nature of the workload? Some workloads won't tolerate the latency that's required when you're moving things between locations. So my EDA workload at Intel, right? That my best engineer would say to me, "Kim, when you can solve the speed of light problem, then we will talk about moving that workload to the cloud," because it's a physics issue. But then there are also things that are really your core company's proprietary information. And if you're saying, "I'm going to invest in that and I want to keep control of it," not because you want to have a data center, but because you want to drive value into the company. And what's the best way to do that, right? And so I always try to elevate the conversation to what is the company trying to get done, and how do you fulfill that strategic agenda?
Yeah, so Kim, you got on one end, you got the technology aspect of cloud. You have things like GPUs, and you were just talking about backhaul. That until we solve the speed of light problem, architecting global cloud applications is going to be a real challenge. But you were talking about payments and things and more business-focused aspects like that. When we talk about Lenovo and the vision for hardware is still, you got to have this, or you don't have any operational capability in the cloud. But businesses are increasingly looking at the outcome of all of this. You were talking about these differentiated workloads. How are companies going to grow up? And arguably we're in this now post-cloud era where we're really just talking about all we care about is the outcome. We don't care about that plumbing and technology anymore.
That's right. That's right. And that's a better place to be from a business perspective. But, from a technologist perspective, make no mistake, that architecting the infrastructure and the network is a huge, huge value to the company. In fact, I would say network is the next great limiter. We've virtualized the compute, we're virtualizing the storage, right? Now you have to look at the network layer and say, what's the right network architecture? Because it gets very complicated when you start talking about the interaction between multiple types of workloads coming from multiple locations. And ultimately, you're trying to get value from that data that you're moving.
You're making me smile. We had this little conversation with Vince Cerf. He was at our conference last year, and I said, "Hey, Vin, what's cloud, right? What's the analogy of the cloud?" It's okay, mainframe time sharing. Okay, we get it. What's the analogy for one of these devices? It's really a VT100, right? It's a dumb terminal. These are a little bit smarter, right? and they go, what's the analogy for NoSQL, right? It's basically pairs, right? Key value stores, key value pairs, right? Yeah. And so this is the guy who invented TCP/IP, right? I'm like, So what's the equivalent to TCP/IP in the cloud, right? Or not, what's the equivalent for networking in the cloud? I go, dude, token ring's coming back, and he slapped me. We get back to token ring. Come on, Banyan Vines.
At one point, I was a cost engineer on token ring cards for IBM. We made a lot of money back in those days.
Yeah, but think about it. Think about it. You just said it, right? The workloads are spread out. The networks are in different places. You know, I mean, those guys at Banyan Vines are going to be hot again. I mean, because I need token ring right now. So.
Yeah. Well, and, one of my mentors who, said to me once, and it just always stuck with me, he said, look, Kim, history repeats itself in modern ways. And so you do see this cyclicality of these, an era of compute and an era, and we're hitting in that next era, but you have to draw from history to predict what is going to be the next great wave. And networking is one of those things that I think are limiters when you think about the ultimate potential that technology can deliver. If I think about, billions of IoT devices that I'm trying to aggregate, really, I only want the key information. I don't want every bit of information, right? I want to process some of that at the point of the endpoint. I want to process some of it at the edge so I can communicate with multiple endpoints. And I want to process some of that in the back end. And just differentiating what goes where is really an interesting problem. But that's the exact same problem that banks first solved when they put online banking. When they had to decide, what transactions were they going to expose at the customer layer, right? What transactions were they going to keep in the back? And so these problems have been solved before, but just not for the specific use case. And I think drawing on that history becomes a really important way to innovate.
Yeah, well, we have the whole scale problem too. I think that we've never faced the kinds of size of the business challenges, the size of the infrastructure, billions, and I think it's really tens and hundreds, soon hundreds of billions of devices. Yeah, so it's exciting times for sure.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah, so what's the tech scene like in North Carolina? What's different about North Carolina versus the Valley? I know like RTP is on fire, lots of startups popping in there, but share with us what's going on out there.
So buying a house was just as hard as it is in Silicon Valley because there were lots of competition. Traffic is just as bad as Silicon Valley.
Well, only in Cary if you're out there. No, just kidding.
But so for me, it's a little bit like coming home because I actually started in Research Triangle Park, my career, my very first job when I was a co-op with IBM during college.
Wow.
Yep. So it's a little bit like coming home, but it's a rich community of biopharmaceutical companies, IT companies, and software companies. We've just got a lot going on in the area, so it's a really exciting place to be. But so far, I have to say I don't know anybody outside of Lenovo, so because it's been pretty busy my first 90 days.
That's right. It's only been 90 days. So.
Yeah.
Yes, that first 100 days is so critical. So Kim, you're arguably one of the very top women in technology, and the odyssey continues in that whole conversation in the Valley. We've seen interesting discussions this year. What's the dynamic like at Lenovo? Something had to draw you there as a leading exemplar of technology.
Yeah. So it's interesting. We had our chairman and CEO was in town a couple weeks ago, and we had a innovation brainstorming session with his staff and just a few other people. So the group that was in there, we sit in this round circle. It's very informal, and we're talking about disruptive technologies that, are we in, or are we not? What should we be doing? It's not a planned discussion or anything like that. And I looked around the room and I thought, half this room are women, right? And the head of corporate strategy is a woman, the head of legal is a woman, and so half the people in the room were women. And then I look at data center group, and half of our staff, of the president's staff, is women. And so, on the one hand, I go, wow, what a different place, what a different time than most of my career. But I honestly believe that more and more decisions are being made about the best candidate. especially at the senior level. And so people, you know, companies are just so hungry for great talent that I do think that the best candidates are getting picked. I do still think we have a pipeline problem for all diverse candidates in tech. I have, you know, noticed, you know, a number of African-American colleagues that I think, why aren't they progressing? And so while we're making progress on the women's issue, I think multiple of our other underrepresented populations need more attention to find out what holds them back, why is that happening, and systematically remove those barriers. And so, you know, I'll say I'm always going to be an advocate for diversity, and I'm always going to be an advocate for women, but I am starting to think more about the other underrepresented populations, and are we doing them a service to create an environment where they thrive in?
Yeah, no, that's a huge issue in the space, and it's really about, it's a 40-year pipeline problem, right? It takes about 40 years to get someone to that level, and helping to create mentors along the way. Hey, Kim, thanks so much for being on the show. You were on episode number 3 in February 16. Welcome to episode number 77, and hopefully see you at Constellation's event. We are seeing Kim Stevenson. You can follow her at Kim Stevenson. Get the extra S if you're trying to follow her. So, all right, thanks a lot.
Thanks, Diane.
Enjoy the Poconos. Very, very cool, man. Diane, look at this. This is, we are moving. 20 minutes flies by super fast.
It really does. Especially when you have someone like Kim on board. Yeah, it's great.
It is amazing. So we've got Adam Martel, our next guest. We're going to do his bio, but he's the CEO and co-founder at Gravity. And you can follow him at ARMATEL for those following on Twitter. Adam is the CEO, but it's the first technology startup especially focused on building AI applications for frontline fundraisers of nonprofit organizations. Think about this, putting AI to work in the world of nonprofits. So before starting this, he was at Babson as a majors gifts fundraiser, which is where he developed this concept for Gravity. It's revolutionary software, but more importantly, he's got an understanding of what nonprofits need to do, how they can be successful, and how they raise money to support their causes throughout this. And throughout his years, he's been a frontline fundraiser. So very, very important. He's founded 3 companies, a serial entrepreneur, and a diverse and eclectic background in not only advertising, public relations, journalism, and collegiate athletic coaching. We're going to have to talk about that. He has also spent time as a senior financial analyst at a major investment management firm where he oversaw the international finance department that guaranteed the accuracy of approximately $50 billion in international and domestic trades. He's a graduate from Merrimack College with a degree in communications and business, and is an MBA candidate at Babson College. So Adam lives in Boston with his wife and 2 beautiful daughters. So Adam, tell us more about how you decided to found Gravity and what is behind this in fundraising and AI.
Absolutely. Well, I'm so excited to be here, and thank you so much for having me. We're so excited. So we started Gravity. I was a major gifts officer at Babson. I was a fundraiser, and the challenges that we saw there were the challenges that sort of every frontline fundraiser or sales professional sees, where we have all this data about our donors or our leads, but the systems that we have weren't really developed for us as end users. You know, they were really wonderful for reporting. They were really, really great for our managers to tell us what we've done, really descriptive data. But I spent more time putting data into the CRM than, you know, the CRM really helping me. And I met a guy at Babson who was absolutely a genius. He had built portfolio analytics systems on Wall Street, and I'd used AI and machine learning to really optimize sales enablement for stocks. And what we found was that donors look a lot like stocks in terms of all their data. And we started surveying the sort of scene of AI and nonprofit data. And we found that the data that nonprofits have about their donors is really richer than any data set in the world about individuals, because it's updated so frequently and so uniquely. And it's just an amazing, amazing space. And obviously the work that the organizations do are so important. And that's what really gets us going.
Yeah, so Adam, this is Diane. So let's talk about fundraising at nonprofit organizations. What are the challenges there? I mean, you know, you apparently saw a need for some solution in the space. What were the pain points that you really see in fundraising?
Yeah, so I was a major gifts officer. All major gifts officers and all frontline fundraisers and nonprofit organizations, they have portfolios of donors. You know, they're between 150 and 200. The challenge is that, you know, at Babson, we had 37,000 alumni, and the top 10% of our donor pool made up 90% of our donations. And we see that across the board where there's a real concentration of wealth at the very top, which means that there's around 3,800 donors at every organization that has that many donors that can make major gifts. And we only had 10 frontline fundraisers, so we were only talking to around 2,000 of 3,700 donors that had capacity. And it was really because we had all this data and we had the CRM, but we weren't being enabled by our technology. So the challenge and the pain for us was that we had more donors than we could handle. Same as sales leads. You know, salespeople want more sales leads, but if you have to spend time figuring out which donors to get to, what to ask them about, sort of doing research on their records and figuring out which ones to get to, you're not going to spend time inspiring donors to make gifts. And this is where we saw technology could really make a difference. You know, it was a big pain point for us.
Wow. So look, AI is a hot trend, and you know, what do you mean by AI, right? Yeah. Like, what is this thing? Like, I saw something about a first draft. Yep. How does that work? This is kind of interesting to me.
Totally. So that was a natural progression. So when we started the company, the challenge we were truly trying to solve was, could we predict which donors were going to make the next biggest gift over the next 3-month period with the data we had within the CRM? And essentially, we were trying to take the cognitive functions of frontline fundraisers and turn them into a platform. So where we have driverless or self-driving cars, you know, version 1 of self-driving cars were triptychs. You guys remember those? AAA. We used to go up and down the East Coast, and my dad would take the triptych and he would flip it. You know, we'd be in New Jersey, and he'd take it again and flip it, and we'd be in, you know, it would keep going south, keep going south. Version 2 was the GPS. You know where you're going, you plug it into a computer, it tells you where to go. Version 3 is, you know, where we are now, where it's assisted parking. We have these cars that can help us stop, help us park. And version 4 is essentially removing our cognitive functions so I can spend time talking to my children while the car drives me somewhere. Exact same thing in frontline fundraising. We have all this data. In version 1 are spreadsheets. Version 2 is having a database that's interactive.
Wait, write your own emails? I think
that's right. So version 3 is actually writing your own email. So when you think about it, we started trying to make predictions. Then we got to the point where we said, you know what, let's not stop there, because everybody stops at analytics. Can we make the analytics actionable for the end user? Truly verticalized AI. And we got to self-writing emails. So we cracked the code in 3 different areas. One is that we can write emails on behalf of the frontline fundraisers that are personalized to each individual donor, no matter where they are in their life cycle. The second is that we can actually deliver the emails without an API to an email inbox, and then we can apply machine learning to refine the emails to match the writing styles of each frontline fundraiser. Think about the implications that can have for everybody in every space. Instead of you going into work and having emails written to you, you go into work and you have emails written for you that you can curate and personalize and get out. We essentially start you on second base is the metaphor we're using now, and it's working.
That's fascinating, Adam. I mean, we hear all this conversations around artificial intelligence. A lot of people have different definitions for it. And I got to believe, you know, it almost sounds like your tool can do a lot of a salesperson's job. And there's this whole worry that eventually, everyone's work will be automated away from them. How do you explain AI to your clients? How would you get, explain it to a salesperson who might be worried about, hey, this is going to end up doing my job someday?
Yeah, absolutely. So, back when Excel came out, accountants were really worried that Excel was going to take their jobs, but it never did. It made them more efficient and allowed them to get more customers and more clients. Same thing's happening with AI. I mean, we see that our fundraisers that work with us can get to 5 or 6 or 10 times more donors, because instead of going through the processes of figuring out which donors to talk to, what to talk to them about, writing a beautifully curated email for each donor, they come into work and they're already written for them. They can do that work, and what we're finding is that they can go home on time. They can do the work, they can do more than they had done before, and they can go home and see their families, and they can get to more donors and get more done. And we can free them up to do the things that computers can't do, which are really inspire donors to make gifts and build relationships, and we can take the busy work out.
Wow. And there are different types of AI here, right? We talk about proactive versus reactive AI, humanized versus dehumanized AI. How do you get there? Like, what are you doing to help achieve that?
Yeah, so we're the first ones that we think have really introduced proactive artificial intelligence. For anybody that uses Gmail, when you're on your phone, if I send you an email, said, Ray, I'd love to find a time to grab coffee with you, Google would say, hey, respond to Adam with yes, no, maybe, and here's a time. What we're saying is you would receive an email that says, hey, you know what? Adam might be great to have on your show. Here's the email you can send to him. Now's the right time because he just released first draft. You probably want to talk to him about it. And the email will be written for you. So reactive AI is essentially, data coming to you and reacting to what you're doing. Proactive AI is actually telling you what you should be doing so you can do great things. And we've been talking about humanized and dehumanized AI for a little while now. And our thesis is that AI is going to go in 2 different directions. So one direction is humanized AI, where we have chatbots, we have Siri. Dehumanized AI are going to be nail guns. We're essentially going to be able to build technology that can help people do more, but they're going to be tools, and they're not going to need to be humanized. I don't need to talk to Gravity. I need Gravity to do something for me the same way a hammer or a nail gun would, and I want to hammer more nails. And essentially, I want to get to more leads and more donors, and that's what we've been able to do.
It's a great story. I mean, you've got bringing AI to the nonprofit space, which I've worked with quite a bit. Yeah. I know their challenges in that they often have really small IT departments. So how do you situate something like Gravity in a place like that? Are you designing it specifically for smaller teams, or are you aiming at larger nonprofits?
Yeah, no, so we're aiming across the board right now. I mean, really, we've been lucky because most of the big CRMs have chosen to work with us, which means that we have access to their data. We can turn it on for most of the CRM customers. We sit on top of every CRM, and fundamentally, we believe that CRM is the cup that holds the water. We want to be what the fundraisers and what the end users actually do with the water, and that's what we want to really be. Essentially, it really doesn't matter. We think for the small organizations, it's wonderful. For the large organizations, it's just as wonderful. If you have a small organization with a donor base of 10,000, we can help you get to more of those donors. If we have a large organization with a donor base of 100,000, we can help you get to more of those donors. But really helping organizations get to more donors, tell their story more efficiently, more proactively, and close more gifts to generate revenue is what we're able to do.
No, that makes sense. Now, when we think about AI, there's 7 elements to success, right? The data that you have, which you're pulling from the CRM teams, that makes sense. The algorithms that you have in place, the compute power that's at hand, which is typically in the cloud, time compression, the ability to get things done very, very quickly, domain expertise, which is what you're bringing to the table, AI being the UX and recommendations. Where do you see your differentiators in this marketplace? Because there's a lot of moving parts here.
Yeah. So there's a few. I mean, first of all, what's unique about us is that nonprofits have never really been able to lead in the technology space because they have to balance their budgets. They have to put most of their money towards the causes they're supporting, and then they have to put some of their money towards raising money. What we found is that because nonprofits have such an amazing set of data about individuals, they're primed to lead the data space and really the AI innovation, because AI's, on the balance sheet, AI really looks at data. It doesn't look at money. I mean, an organization can have trillions and trillions of dollars, but if we don't have data to support artificial intelligence, the intelligence is not going to be there. It's not going to be wonderful. When we talk about time compression, I mean, we're truly saving time for the end users. We're doing jobs for them, which is what we think AI should be doing. The same as self-driving cars. You shouldn't have to drive your car. You shouldn't have to write the initial emails. And then really the actionability. This is the first time that proactive artificial intelligence has been introduced, and really being able to take action on the artificial intelligence and not just having descriptive analytics, but actually having prescriptive analytics that are doing things for you that help you hit your end goals is what we think is going to change the world.
The fundraising efficiency is important, I see.
That's right.
That's an important metric, apparently, in the nonprofit industry.
That's right. That's right.
So, got it.
Yeah. So, Adam, you've now been on the journey of the startup, which so many have before you, and you've hit all the bumps in the road, and the enormous amount of work and effort to get to a product that people really, really want.
Yeah.
What advice do you have for other startup CEOs? Where we are today in the industry, and that the funds are not as available as they used to be.
Yep.
Talent is really, really hard to get because they're being sucked up by the big companies. What advice do you have for other founders?
Yeah, there's really, I think, 3 pieces of advice we usually give. The first is solve a problem that's a first-person problem. Make sure that when you're applying artificial intelligence, you're not just talking about artificial intelligence or machine learning or any of the buzzwords. Actually solve a problem that's defined with artificial intelligence, and make sure it's a problem that you understand. I mean, we see far too often founders and co-founders and even folks that are sort of mid-level trying to solve problems they don't really understand. And we think artificial intelligence is best applied to problems that people truly understand. So you really need domain expertise. The second is to find a great co-founder. I wasn't a technical co-founder. I found a technical co-founder at Babson when I was getting my MBA. His name's Rich Palmer. He's a genius. He has so much experience on the tech side, and this company wouldn't be what it is without his experience and without his ability to be able to move us forward quickly. And then find a great set of investors and a great board. I mean, I've talked to a bunch of CEOs who are scared of their board. They don't interact well with their board. We have the most supportive, wonderful board who has helped us and moved us along, helped us through tough times, really celebrated us with good times, and our investors have done the same thing. So I think if you can get all 3 of those things in place, you can really build a successful company.
Yeah, Fred Wilson says that a lot of startups in his portfolio have had to pivot. Did you go right into AI, or did you guys have to make a major course correction?
Yes, we don't talk about it so much as a pivot. We talk about it in terms of moving forward. So when we started, we wanted to be able to predict which donors are going to make the next biggest gifts, but we found that wasn't quite enough because users still had to log into a platform. So our thesis became, listen, if we could get the data to the frontline fundraisers without them having to log into a platform, we could provide them the same benefits that a SaaS would provide them, but it would be in their email. And fundamentally, fundraisers and most salespeople only have 3 screens open. They have their CRM, they have their email, and they have their calendar. So we thought if we could capture the email and the calendar, we could really make a difference. And from there, we found that we could really communicate a lot in email. And so it was more of a progression in us understanding that descriptive analytics, predictive intelligence wasn't going to be enough. We had to actually do something for the end user. So I think it was more of a progression than a pivot, but it's not where we started.
Like really listen to what the user's pain is and what they're trying to accomplish.
That's right. And despite the fact I was a frontline fundraiser, I mean, every day we are on calls with our customers, and our customers are so gracious with their time, and they all want us to be successful because they're doing things they've never done before. I mean, we had an organization raise $1.5 million in the fourth quarter, more than they had raised the entire year before. And it's a small organization. The impact is just amazing. So we're trying to find ways to accelerate that impact for other organizations.
Got it. How's the startup scene where you are in Boston? Like, are there good resources? Are there good mentors? Like, who are you turning to for advice?
Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, it is just great. The Launchpad Ventures, they're the angel syndicate here. They've been really big supporters of us. There's a whole bunch of VCs. Stage 1 Ventures is a really wonderful VC in Boston. All of these folks know each other, which is probably the biggest benefit of being in Boston. The Valley's like that as well. But when you're in Boston, I mean, it's such a small town that all the AI companies, we all sort of know each other. We're all picking each other's brains. Because AI is so verticalized and AI has to be applied to such a vertical solution. If you're AI for HR, if you're AI for self-driving cars, you're not competing with us. And we don't think of ourselves as competitors, but there's so much we can learn together and move the industry forward quickly. And I think that's the biggest benefit, is finding folks that are really facing the same challenges that we're facing in the same space that we're playing in, but not the exact same vertical, and using their learning to help us move forward, and then doing the same and being reciprocal.
So Adam, who do you really look up to when you first got into the space in terms of other startups? There's a lot of folks doing great things in CRM. Of course, there's Salesforce, which is the 800-pound gorilla in the industry, and the amazing things that they have done. Yeah. Who did you look to really for inspiration?
Yeah, I mean, we looked at Salesforce, Blackbaud, Roy Solutions. They're a small CRM in Boston, and they are really wonderful. They're sort of at the forefront of the CRM technology space. Abila, community brands down in Austin. We've been looking at all those folks because fundamentally, we always knew that we were never going to be a bottom-up CRM. We were never going to hold data. So we were looking at what they were doing and trying to figure out where to go from there. Really, it was individuals, though. I mean, we look at Christopher Mirable and Ham Lord, Raymond Chang. I mean, those guys, David Baum, if you know him. I mean, these folks are titans in the industry, and they've taken 2 young entrepreneurs under their wings and really helped us shape the company, but also given us the freedom to make mistakes and really make great strides and be successful in our own ways. And we wouldn't be where we are without those type of folks.
No, this has been great. Thanks for your advice and thanks for your insight. We're here with Adam Martel, CEO and co-founder at Gravity. You can follow him on Twitter at ARMATEL. Thanks a lot for being on the show.
Thank you guys so much.
Thanks, Adam.
Wow. We've Diane, we've been talking to people from 2 great startup cities, RTP, and of course, Boston and the Cambridge area. Definitely a lot of insights there. What are some of the top cities you've been seeing, Diane, like where startups have been forming and are really thriving?
Well, I mean, I think there's a lot of exciting stuff happening down in Austin, of course, right? It's affordable living down there, which I think really matters. It's been a huge issue, I think, in Silicon Valley. New York continues to, be a great space for startups, and I see a lot of activity. And see companies like Sprinkler, creating multi-billion-dollar organizations on the East Coast, which you really expect to see only on the West Coast. And also some interesting things happening in places like Portland, where you would normally expect. And I think you're seeing some outliers there that are creating some great startups.
And DC as well, where you are as well.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so there's always some really interesting players in the DC area. It's just not as large as these other areas, and our cost of living is similar to the Valley, though.
Oh God, that's horrible. Oh, hey, let's. Who do we have next? Oh, we got Doug. Doug, our Vice President, Principal Analyst at Constellation Research. And Doug, as you know, has been our VP looking at data-driven decisions. He's leading that research, how organizations employ data analysis to reimagine their business models and gain a deeper understanding of their customers. So Doug's research also looks at how innovative applications of data analysis require a multidisciplinary approach with information and orchestration technologies, continuing through BI, data visualization and analytics, and moving into NoSQL and big data analysis. So he's been covering a lot of these areas. He's looking at insight-driven business models and interest in and how they are of interest to the C-suite, but more importantly, to executives like CEOs, chief digital officers, CFOs, and CMOs that are really trying to figure out how to tie this to anything from marketing to supply chains. Doug was the former executive editor of Information Week and also one of the top influencers of CIOs and decision makers around the world. So Doug, welcome to the show.
Nice to be here. Hello, Diane. Hello, Ray. Good time of year.
Yeah, it's great to see you, Doug. Yeah, exactly.
Very, very cool. So topic one is this topic that you've been going deep on, which is really on smart analytics, right? And what's going on here? Like, what is there? Is this like is this kind of the beginning of the trend? Is this kind of the middle of the trend? Who are the vendors that are popping up here? What's going on?
Very much the beginning. Adam was saying that AI is so verticalized, but I'm looking at how it's becoming available as a horizontal set of technologies, because I think companies are going to want to be, building their own AI and not just buying it as an application. So I'm doing a survey right now, kind of a market overview of smart BI and analytics features. I hesitate to call it AI. I think a lot of the people in this space, the data management professionals, are a little jaded. They saw that first round of AI. I think they're a little cynical about things being hyped as AI, and I think the vendors are very cautious about using that term. They're very familiar and have been using things like machine learning, and they know what deep learning is. Those things have, the machine learning at least has been around for decades. It's something that a lot of these data scientists, data professionals have used. But now it's showing up all over the place. It's showing up in self-service data prep. It's showing up in data exploration, data analysis, and then in the area of predictive and prescriptive. But the difference is that these technologies are being democratized, and they're being used to democratize, to bring these capabilities. As Adam was saying, they had the data, but they couldn't get at it. Well, the idea is using these technologies and exposing these technologies in a way that makes it accessible to mainstream business users, whether that's through automation or through natural language interaction, the ability to query and do things with natural language. But these are people that don't know how to spell SQL and don't know the first thing about which machine learning technique to choose.
What would you mean, like Cortana? Yeah. Tell Alexa I'm here.
Yeah, something like that. There's activity in the space. In my survey I'm turning up, I think I have more than 25 startups that are training on this area, the data professionals, and making analytics and BI more accessible to business users. But the established vendors aren't going to just sit back. The likes of SAS and SAP and IBM and Tableau and all those guys are making acquisitions and working on things organically to bring these smart features to their
yeah. So Doug, this really brings up, I think, an important point in that there's a lot of marketing talk around artificial intelligence, but the serious data scientists really don't only want to talk about machine learning, deep learning, and things like that. And so you see the business users, I think, have a hard time discerning where the real value is. Yeah. How do you bucket AI versus machine learning and deep learning? How are they different? Are they different, or is this all becoming architectures now, essentially?
Well, I've been focusing mainly on machine learning techniques, things trained at more structured data, and then deep learning techniques, more often trained at more unstructured information, image, voice, and that's where I see those two tangents. AI, I really kind of think that it gets more legitimate when AI tends to be very verticalized. You see these whole applications that have context. Without that context and without a specific business problem that they're going after. To me, it's simply various techniques and use of things like machine learning and deep learning.
Yeah, no, we're seeing this big shift, and then how people define analytics and ML is getting pretty crazy. So let me ask you, what defines a smart app versus a off-the-shelf AI app?
Well, I think those two terms are kind of synonymous to me. I look at, some of these applications coming out from, like Salesforce Einstein and what SAP is talking about with Leonardo, Oracle Adaptive Intelligent Apps, what Infor is talking about with Coleman. They're talking about making these packaged applications smarter. What I've been looking at in this look at just general horizontal analytics and BI capabilities is bringing AI techniques to a platform that they can use to build smart data-driven applications. So some of the themes I've been seeing back that context of a specific application. What they're doing is building context by looking at the roles and the rights and the usage of data, how people are looking at data, what they're looking at, what others like them are looking at. So it's sort of the graph of interaction with data and the graph of that analysis of data. And there's startups in this area like Digital Reasoning that are working on this, but a lot of the vendors that I've talked to have it in their roadmap, and they're working on it. And it helps to, if you can take that graph and understand what people are looking at, what others like them have looked at, it can help to surface the user relevant information, whether that's trends or anomalies or KPIs or the segments that it looks like that might be of interest. And then you do some training. You have this selection process of people saying, oh yeah, let me look at this one. This one looks interesting. And you have that, you gain that data to train and reinforce the smarts of these systems. And it can also help with guided analysis, suggesting visualizations and analyses. So that's one of the themes I'm seeing, but there's some others that are kind of interesting. Another theme is in the natural language interaction. This is where you can type a query or speak a query, and the computer recognizes the key dimensions that are of interest that people seem to be after and can sort of interpret. We've seen this in the market for a number of years. IBM Watson Analytics can do that, Microsoft Power BI. But the next step is making it conversational to retain that context of the original query and to be able to drill down. I had a briefing this week with a more of a startup, ThoughtSpot, and they did a demo where, they just, what are the sales by state? And it came up with a visualization very quickly on the fly. It wasn't canned. It was something that you kind of saw the dimensions of interest and came up with a visualization. But then it was also able to suggest, and you could drill down into dimensions like, okay, well, which are the stores that are really, California showed to be the high sales state? Which are the stores? Which are the zip codes? What loyalty plan do those customers have? What are the products that they're purchasing most frequently? What's the income bracket? The system was able to suggest all these things kind of on the fly and take the user deeper just with that drill down, as opposed to, you hear Alexa and Google Home. It's like you ask one question at a time, but you can't take it further. You need the original context and to continue on that context and to probe and drill to get to the real answer that people are after.
Wow. Hey, so what's hot on autonomous vehicles? That's the other thing that you're spending a lot of time on, talking about mobility, but not mobility like this, but mobility like this. And what's more interesting about that is you also have a panel at Connected Enterprise on this. So what's going on? What are these big themes that are happening in AVs and all these generations of AVs from level 3 to level 4 to level 5 that folks are trying to get to?
Well, yeah, this conference season is heating up, and but I'm particularly looking forward to Constellation Connected Enterprise. It's October 26 to 29, I think. I have a panel I'm leading on. I think my rough title is AI, Autonomous Vehicles, and the next disruptive. My anchor guest is Evangelos Simoutis. He's an author. He wrote a book earlier this year called The Big Data Opportunity in Our Driverless Future. And one of the things I like about him is that he's kind of looking beyond 2020 and that he's kind of looking beyond 2020 and 2021. I think we have a given that we're going to have sort of level 4 automotive vehicle capabilities. You know, this, the idea of autonomous driving is with us. Now let's look at what the impact of that is going to be. And Evangelos is one of these guys who, you know, he's looking beyond the gee whiz to show me the money. And I think his take, and you know, I think the car companies and transit companies are following this, and they have already come to the same conclusion that it's, you know, it's where money is going to prevail. It's where it's going to be a big saving opportunity. That's where you're going to see adoption. So, you know, ride hailing and, you know, mobility on demand, trucking, logistics on demand, not so much the, you know, individual ownership of autonomous cars. I mean, that might be more like, you know, we've seen with hybrid vehicles. They're still just a fraction of the market. Last week I was reading that in the UK, they're going to do a trial next year of semi-autonomous trucks next year. This is technology that they've tested in Sweden and Germany, where these trucks they're called connected convoys, are going from plants to the shipping center in Rotterdam. And the idea is platooning. So they have a lead truck and then two trucks right behind that lead truck, and they're like right on the bumper. That lead truck has the driver, and they can intervene. The 2 trucks that follow are just following that lead vehicle. And the idea is, first of all, it maximizes drafting, so it improves the fuel efficiency.
Yep.
It also cut on the congestion. And then presumably, once this is proven and shown to be safe, the lead driver comes out of that lead truck.
And that's really the whole value proposition. And if you look at the big picture, autonomous vehicles can unleash literally trillions of dollars in revenue not spent in upgrading freeways and infrastructure in the United States alone over the next 20 years, because we can put a lot more cars on the road. They can use that next generation mobility to coordinate amongst themselves using, you know, IoT devices, you know, 3D radar, all of those kinds of great technologies. But I have a bet with, you know, Enterprise Irregular, Vinny Merchandani, about when is this going to happen? When's the tipping point? You know, what technologies or what advances are required for us to actually get there so we can tap into that economic value?
Well, you know, that's a good point. You know, I think we're going to be dealing with unintended consequences, but I think the money is what's going to drive. I couldn't say, I'll have some panelists who can speak to, is it LiDAR or what is it that is, you know, the game changer? But I think, you know, the money matters here. Right. So trucking, I think, is probably going to take the lead. You know, we have 2.5 million truck drivers in the U.S., very well-paid job. I've seen predictions that within 10 years, we're going to see the long-haul driver disappear. This is, you know, from factory to distribution center, the major routes, and not a lot of surface streets. And then within 20 years, it'll get to the short haul, where it's that last mile from the DC to the, you know, to the front door, to the individual store, to the individual home. So, you know, I look at an industry I was in for 20 years, media. You know, we don't think about that in terms of AI, but media, man, that has gone through a digital transformation over 20 years. Yeah. And if you were inside it, you really didn't recognize the huge changes. But if you look back 20 years to the way media was and the way it is today, completely different.
You're making me think of that scene in Logan where the autonomous trucks are like moving back and forth with each other, like running folks around. It's like there's no one in there and things moving fast. So yeah. Hopefully speed limits go up too with autonomous vehicles. So
well, yeah, I've thought about that. It's like, okay, well, these autonomous vehicle companies aren't going to be able to program a vehicle to speed. You know, that'll be illegal. That'll be a lawsuit. You know, and that's why I don't think individual drivers are going to be so thrilled. I think my colleague Alan Lepofsky talked about riding in one of these vehicles, and first it was really cool, and then it was really boring because it was following the speed limits and driving at the speed limit and not, you know, stopping. And it's not the way you would want to drive unless you definitely were in traffic and you wanted to be working or more productive in another way. Not the driving experience you would want on your vacation, say.
Or being entertained. I imagine the self-driving vehicles are going to have a lot of screens on the inside that keep their passengers occupied.
There you go.
Well, here's the thing I'm more worried about is like for a human to drive among autonomous vehicles, my insurance rates are going to go up. I'm like the wild card, right? It's like, it's a human. They're going to make a lot of mistakes. They're unpredictable, right? They might cut me off. So.
Yeah, well, real humans, you'll be relegated to the test track like everybody else, right? We were going to drive ourselves.
It reminds me of a point that that Evangelos makes in his book. It's that these car companies that exist today, if they hope to be in the market in the future, they can't just kind of interact with these startups. They've got to act like startups. And the three of us were recently at the Ford Silicon Valley lab. We sort of had a company offsite there, and it was good to see at Ford in particular, they're not just thinking like they're a car company, they're thinking they're a mobility company. And that's the main thing that struck me at that visit, that they weren't just working on cars, they were also working on the total mobility. They said, we're going to be a mobility company, so we have to solve the parking problem, we have to solve the last mile, maybe we have systems that do timed or assigned or designated parking to eliminate cars circling and that congestion problem. They were talking about railway technology and autonomous van service and even bikes off that trunk of that commute in a sort of a new public transit mobility on demand model. So it's good to see that some of these companies are just thinking outside the box of I'm a car manufacturer.
Well, I was with you there, Doug, on that trip, and it was great to see Ford with a innovation center in Silicon Valley, because we're moving from drivetrains to silicon. Software is the most important thing about cars now, and that's a huge change. And I think we see that Ford is doing that. I've been doing a lot of other innovation centers the last couple of years, and this one, Ford's lab, felt a lot like a tech company, not like an auto manufacturer. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, but they also showed us a slide there to show they had a map of the Silicon Valley and how every other manufacturer also had an innovation center in Silicon Valley. The real test is, and they made a point of talking about, it's not just a monthly call with Dearborn. There's cross-filtering of these executives from Dearborn. And to Evangelo's point, they can't just talk to these innovators in Silicon Valley. They've got to act like them.
Yeah, and what was also interesting about that is they're building their new innovation lab, and it was just across the street, and it was like twice as big. So definitely doubling down in the Valley on the innovation centers. Well, this has been awesome, Doug. Thank you for being on the show. Where are you going to be in the next few weeks in terms of conferences and events?
Yeah, I'm going to be at Microsoft Insight. I'm going to be at the Oracle Open World. I'm going to be at the Tableau conference. I'm going to be at Dreamforce. Any number of events. Strata in New York, a big data event. So hope to see you all there, and have a great Labor Day.
See a lot of them there.
Hey, thanks a lot for being on the show, Doug. You can follow Doug at DHENSCHENS. So Doug Henschen, you can reach him there on Twitter and follow him for his insights on data to decisions.
Leave off the S on the end. HGNS.
DHENSCHEN. Sorry about that. So you got him here. So, and Constellations Conference is October 24th through 27th at the Half Moon Bay Ritz. So thank you for being on the show, Doug.
Very good. Bye now.
Very, very cool. We are 181 guests in on Disrupt TV. Diane, thank you so much for being our guest co-host today. Where are you going to be in the next few weeks? What's going on with you?
Well, same thing as Doug. It'll be a lot of those same events. Microsoft Insights, the one I'm looking forward to in particular. I think Microsoft has been on a real tear the last year and a half, putting out software faster than most organizations can absorb. I'm anxious to see what they're doing with artificial intelligence. I'll be at Dreamforce speaking, and you have lots of ERP events, things like that.
Very, very cool. This is awesome. Episode 78 next week. Adrian Fisher, CEO of TinkerBots. If you haven't checked out TinkerBots, you should. Think about the old ways. Tinker Toys meets robotics, all in the one. And Michael Sonnerhalt. He's the author of Think Bigger and 39 other winning strategies from a successful entrepreneur. Fun book to read if you haven't checked it out yet. And of course, Larry Dingen, a repeat host, a repeat guest, editor-in-chief at ZDNet. So, hey, thanks a lot for being on the show, everyone. And if it's Friday, it is Disrupt TV. See you guys.